Hola, y'all. What's good, man? Alrighty. I know I'm supposed to be doing these a lot more regularly, but this is another spiel. Um, I I was thinking about something, and it got me into digging a little deeper in some things, and you know, there's a somewhat of an issue slash non-issue. I think. I mean, in some regards, depending on how you look at it. Um, to go on ahead and say it, today's men are weaker than those of the previous generation. And I think that largely that's because the role of a man, or the things that typically make a man, have become more obsolete, or have become things that aren't really, you know, defined. It's interesting. A lot of times I see criticism about millennials or young people like me, a lot of dudes who don't know how to do certain tasks that our fathers or our fathers' fathers, or things like, some people don't know how to do oil changes, or don't know how to use a drill, or all sorts of hardware stuff. Um, Large part for me, you know what I mean. I wasn't completely involved in that process with my father. A lot of times when I wanted to, with my stepfather, 'cause he raised me more so. With my stepfather, a lot of the tasks that he would do around the house when I was a lot younger, he kind of kept me away from. And as I got older, as a teenager, I became more to myself. And so even with that, there was no real desire or need for me to do certain things. um so that's just like, for example, me. Now there are some basic things that I know how to do. Of course, I know how to paint. I know how to seal a wall up. Pretty sure I could figure out some basic hardware stuff, right? But you know, I've never really had the need to change a tire myself. I've never changed the tire or changed oil in a car. I don't really know much about cars. Whereas, someone younger, say my dad or his dad, they know a lot about that, right? They know how to change their oil, change their own car, diagnose certain problems. They can build a bench, or like, like they know their way around a drill or a hammer. I can certainly use a drill. Um, but there are a lot of things that you know they were required to do, and those were man-oriented tasks. But in today's age, the things that normally men were left to do have become obsolete. Number one, due to both societal pressures, and just like, how can I explain this? Services in general. So, you know, most guys don't change their oil. Like, most people don't change the oil when a lot of people can just go to a place and get it changed for free. Most people don't assemble their own furniture because it probably already comes pre-packaged, for the most part. Um, you can buy a whole bookshelf already assembled, in many regards. Of course, like, sometimes you have to assemble it, but you can actually buy one fully assembled. Um, Most people rather pay someone to fix their problems because the service exists, rather than deal with it themselves. You know what I mean? And I was reading something that was saying that in general, like, millennial men are literally like, and this is an article that was on the Washington Post, but this article cited it themselves. Um, and it's a conservative oriented article. You know, I'm not particularly polarized when it comes to politics. That I'm not gonna, you know, consider something. But one of the things that it was saying was that, you know, far as like force pounds or whatnot, a man was able to, like back in the day, like like previous generations, men were able to lift like 100, or like they had like 117 pounds of like force pounds of pressure on average, and women had 98. And now millennial men's force pounds is equivalent to women's, and in some cases lower, like physically speaking. And sorry, I had a hair in my mouth. Yeah. But they're weaker physically because there's less inactivity. There are less physically demanding tasks that are required of men. And when you look at typically when we look at gender roles from a societal criticism, the way the rise of feminism is positive in many aspects for this. It holds men who have largely had a large majority of the power accountable for their actions, and that's a good thing. But in the struggle to do that, women overtake a larger amount of societal power in that regard. And when you look at gender roles, the societal criticisms for men stop them from really pushing to their like their nature or the things that we would consider their roles to be. So for example, I've seen a lot of women who say that like traditionally women would say that a man has to approach them, and if a man doesn't approach them, then they they feel like they never wanted them. Like a man has to be like by nature they think man is the hunter, so he should go towards them. Of course, like there's a lot of women who on the opposite end who say they want to shoot their shot first, but that is still a perception, that men ought to make the first move. And so when you think about that, right, a lot of men in a lot of regards, they look at the criticisms for their approach towards women, and they ask themselves, is it right for me to do so? I've seen certain women who say that the mere fact that someone approached them, and they felt like, they shouldn't have even assumed that they had wanted to be approached, makes them off-put. And I understand that. But I also understand a man's, want to deal with that, right? So there's a balance between the two, right? And the question is, with societal, roles, with the age of technology and, the evolution of society, certain things that were specifically gender role specific are becoming more obsolete, and a lot of things are melding together. Because of the age of technology, a lot of manual labor tasks are not as required. Therefore, a lot of things that you would normally need men for, things that required physical strength, so on and so forth, are not a thing. A lot of women, for example, look for men to protect them. As protectors, traditionally a man's role is to protect and provide. A lot of women, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but a lot of women make more money than their husband. So some would argue, well, if he's not the primary, maker of income, who is truly providing, right? You could argue that since both of them contribute, both of them provide. Sure, but you could also argue that since she is the primary, person of income, that she's the one that people may possibly be more dependent on. Situations vary from person to person, but in a traditional household, even if a man was the primary breadwinner of the household, he would be considered the provider. And when you look at the protector role, you could argue from a perspective, if a man is physically weaker than his partner, can he, truly protect her? And in some cases, yes. Like you can stop an intruder, for example. You can, try to make an effort, you know what I mean? But if you're physically weaker than your spouse, and their physical strength allows them to have a better advantage, for themselves, you could argue that a man can't truly be, the protector in that regard. So when you look at that, the role or the things that we subscribe to as far as gender roles, you know what I mean, has become obsolete. And I think the solution has to be this: either there needs to be a balance, and that balance is the challenging part. Either there needs to be a balance, or people need to decide. People as a whole, and multiple societies are, since this is more so an American issue, and a Western world issue, because this happens in Europe and stuff. They have a similar culture, in Australia and Europe and so on and so forth. Since this is an issue in our society, we would have to come up with concrete ideas of our perception on things. And I'm not saying that everyone should think the same, but I think that there should be sorry, it's a bug. I think that there should be a unanimous, almost unanimous agreement, sort of an agreement upon the roles of society. And I think that it should be plain and clear. Because, the more when you think about the role of, genders and, sexes in the society, it confuses, I think that it confuses, the function of society. If people don't really have an idea on what it is they should subscribe to or be, they're directionless, and they make, not so educated or wise decisions. So I'm not saying that any human being should not have, should not have the freedom to choose what they want out of life. Absolutely not. And I think that people are individuals and entitled to be individuals in their own right. But, and be who they want to be. But I think that in terms of, the sexes, male and female, to sort of gain that clarity, or to, have the perception completely obsolete of what certain roles are to be, pretty much, I think that would make things a lot easier. And I think that would help progress society, because a lot of people argue that there's the de-evolution of man, and intellect and so on and so forth. But intellect is a whole nother discussion that I'm going to have another day. But this has been the spiel part 2. I would love to know what you guys think about this. As always, I'm looking rough. This is something that I do when I just am thinking about something, and I just want to talk about it, and then I upload it to YouTube. But you guys let me know in the comments what you think, and have a great one. Bye-bye.